of, to quote unquote, abhorrent racial slurs. No, we're pretty nasty, actually.
Yeah, they were.
He'd posted 2 years ago, he was aged 16 through media reports. He apologised immediately, writing that he was embarrassed by the comments and had matured and grown since then. It was too late. His admission had been revoked. What do you make of this, Julia Hartley-Moore? Is it unfair to punish people for things they said when they were, I don't know, young and stupid?
Well, sorry, that was only two. If you asked me about being 16, forget it. That's 100 years ago. That was 2 years ago. I'm sorry, that kid, I don't care. He had to think those things to say them. And
16?
I don't care. I'm sorry. He's 16 in this day and age. We're 2019. No, I'm tough on that. I just think, no, sorry, you're going to say things like that? He has to believe them and feel them to say them.
Do you slam the doors and lock the door behind you on young people like that?
Well, not all young people, I think, but what he said was pretty bad. It really was, and he should know better. You know, he should know better.
But but also not only that, but he's led a crusade that adds to a conservative flavour. More guns are the answers. So he's part of a wider picture. At the end of the day, Harvard is a private institution. It is their right who they accept and who they don't accept. And I tell you what, there's a little very conservative college called Liberty College, and I bet if you were a believer in a protective reproductive rights, they wouldn't let you in.
Okay, Well, Jack, what's your take on this? I suppose the bigger issue is, to what extent do things that we write on social media, be it, 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, and particularly as a journalist, do you have to be mindful about what you post, on Twitter or Facebook, that type of thing?
Well, excuse me. For me personally, putting something on the social media, especially over Facebook, is something that you have to be careful of, because there are certain things that might insult to someone, hurt someone's feeling. So yeah.
Got to be mindful, of particularly in our line of business, huh?
Well, because it never goes away now, whatever you say. That's the thing; it's there forever. So you want to be careful, whatever you do on social media.
And it's quite a huge issue in Samoa at the moment because the government is clamping down on. There's a new form of censorship. We've seen it through Rocketman the movie, and also some limit and some laws that have been enacted in terms of Facebook. Not just personally insults, but if you criticise the government. So it is a double-edged sword.
You've got to be careful with the government there, Jack.
Yeah.
They will just come and hunt you down.
Gosh. Yes, all right. Yeah, because we saw a similar situation unfold, didn't we, Julia, when Brett Kavanaugh was nominated to sit on the Supreme Court, albeit he was alleged to have actually sexually assaulted someone. I mean, are you okay with bad things people did following them around their whole lives? Can you ever wash out the stain of something like this?
It depends on what it is, I think. It really does depend on what it is.
Supreme Court judge?
Yeah.
That's a different kettle of fish.
Yeah, sure. You've been a great panel. Thank you very much for being with us. Julia Hartley-Moore, Shane Tapoa, and our wonderful guest from the Pacific here, Edgar Howard from Vanuatu, and from Samoa, Jack Simona Utafa. Thank you very much for being with us on the show. Chic Point next. I'm Wallace. See you tomorrow.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's program, 2 are dead after a car and train collide on a rural crossing in Bay of Plenty. Meanwhile, another signal fault in Auckland causes commuter chaos. How many inquiries does it take? A third one's underway into Oranga Tamariki and the so-called uplifting of babies. Another girl's banned from a rugby team. This time age is not the issue. It's because she's a girl. And remember our story of a working family's excruciating wait for a state house along with 11,000 odd others? Well, stand by for some good news. And would you eat meat a month past its use-by date? What about 6-month-old yogurt? Yummo. We speak to the man taking waste not, want not to the extreme.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata tēnei. A man who killed 3 road workers in a Bay of Plenty crash in February has been ordered to pay $21,000 in emotional harm reparation. He was also sentenced in the Whakatane District Court this afternoon to 250 hours of community work and disqualified from driving for 21 months. David Michael Cox had admitted 3 charges of careless driving causing the deaths of road workers Dudley Sole Raroa, David Reginald Te Wira Eparaima and Haki Graham Hiha. Judge Peter Rollo said Cox misjudged the distance between 2 trucks by just 20 centimetres.
The 3 men had been standing beside the truck. They were crushed by the vehicle overturning on them. A very tragic situation. Undoubtedly, they would have thought that the measures they took to highlight their position with the work they were doing would have been adequate to keep them safe and secure, but it was not to be.
Judge Peter Rollo. An eyewitness says the car involved in a fatal collision with a train in Bay of Plenty this morning was pushed about 4 metres into a pole. 2 people are dead and 3 are injured after their car was hit by a train near the intersection of State Highway 2 and Ponga Kawa School Road south of Tauranga. Chanel Whitaker, who lives across from the intersection, saw the tragedy unfold.
I heard the crash, which made me look up and saw the car flying off the track, and Jersey flew out and the pole of the train lights just went down. So I just went running down trying to find my phone and then panicked.
Chanel Whitaker says that she's seen a number of near misses at the crossing, with people speeding up to beat the train as the bells are going. 2 of the 3 injured people are men in their late 20s from Tauranga. A 27-year-old man is in a serious condition in Tauranga Hospital, and a 29-year-old has just been transferred to Waikato Hospital. A 3rd person is in Waikato Intensive Care. Kiwi Rail has launched an investigation into its Auckland train network after the 3rd citywide shutdown this year. A power fault after the rail signalled and halted trains for almost half an hour this morning. The Auckland Mayor Phil Goff says it's unacceptable, disruptive and has demanded answers. A university student, Matthew Dennis, was on a train at Homai Station in South Auckland when it stopped, and passengers were advised of an hour-long delay.
I was like, okay, I've got an exam in an hour and I've got no means of getting there. So I rang an Uber, and luckily I got there in time, because if I'd have been 10 minutes later, it would have cost me $200. But as it was, it cost me $50 anyway. And being a student, on student loan money, etc., I think it was about 25% of my weekly budget.
University student Matthew Dennis. The Ombudsman says his investigation into Oranga Tamariki taking babies from their mothers will be different from 2 other inquiries. Oranga Tamariki will carry out an internal investigation into the attempted removal of a newborn baby from Hawke's Bay Hospital, while the Children's Commissioner will carry out a more general inquiry into the practice of removing Māori babies. Ombudsman Peter Bosher says there is a lot of justifiable concern, and his unique powers allow him to examine Oranga Tamariki's interactions with other agencies, such as district health boards.
Some people have called for a royal commission. Others have said that what's happening isn't truly independent. We are truly independent. So we've decided that with the broad powers and functions we've got, we're the right people to take into account what others are doing, but have a broader reach ourselves. So that's why we've decided to do it.
Peter Bosher aims to make his findings public by the end of the year. The company behind a controversial mineral mine in inland Otago has been placed in voluntary receivership. Corda Mentha has been appointed receiver to Plamen Resources, which owns 42 hectares of land near Middlemarch, including the scientifically significant Folden Maar. Playman had sought Overseas Investment Office approval to buy an adjoining farm in the hopes of mining diatomite from the Maar. The Maar is a 23-million-year-old crater lake containing large deposits of diatomite, which has preserved a treasure trove of fossils and a record of climate change in the area. Playman's plans have caused significant controversy. A Kiwi Fern star says she's disappointed that in 2019 an 11-year-old girl can't play rugby with the boys. boys. 5 principals from schools around Hawke's Bay have decided not to let Briar Hales from Havelock North Intermediate play in the boys' first 15 at a school competition. They say the team won't get any points if she steps onto the field. Kiwi Ferns captain Hani Hireme says it's frustrating girls are still having to fight to play rugby.
I'd just like to, encourage other young girls that find themselves in those situations to speak up. It's really good that Briar's dad brought this to the media attention and let New Zealand public know, because we should speak up in these situations and support this young girl who really just wants to play the game that she loves, which is rugby.
Hani Hireme says she'd like to see the boys and Briar's team take a stand for her. It's 5:05. A desperate South African face a much-win situation when they play New Zealand at the Cricket World Cup in Birmingham tonight. The match is being described as a virtual quarter-final for the Proteas, who've already had 3 losses and need to win all of their remaining matches to make the playoffs. Batsman Quinton de Kock says they will be severely tested by New Zealand.
Playing against New Zealand is going to be a tough competition. It's a quarter-final, I guess you can say it. We know how good New Zealand are playing at the moment. They are a big team in World Cups. They always seem to step up. And so it's going to be a tough one anyway.
New Zealand are in a strong position to qualify for the semi-final, sitting second in the table behind holders Australia after 3 wins in 4 matches. The Crusaders will be at full strength for Friday night Super Rugby quarter-final against the Highlanders in Christchurch, and prop Owen Franks is itching to get stuck into some scrums. Franks returns from an almost 3-month injury absence to complete an All Blacks front row alongside Cody Taylor and Joe Moody, while All Black fullback Ben Smith is back in the Highlanders lineup. Franks is expecting a stiff challenge from a Highlanders pack he describes as one of the best.
A lot of people thought they might not have been in here, so they've almost got that nothing to lose type feel, which is pretty dangerous to play against. Personally, they got the best scrum in the competition, so it's going to be an awesome challenge for us.
Owen Franks. That's the news.
Claws out in the UK.
I think it just shows you, what a kind of catnip issue, if I could put it the way Brexit is, for Conservative Party activists.
Speaking out in Parliament. Freedom of speech doesn't mean, and hate speech doesn't mean, the right not to be offended. And out on the waves on the East Coast.
What our grandfather said to my mum, how people always went back to the ocean to find that reconnection, that well-being.
On the airwaves, Morning Reports with Corin Dan and Susie Ferguson, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, visiting food scientist Professor Ricky Yara on the movement towards plant-based food and New Zealand's role in its production. And after 10, Jock Phillips turns his deep historical skills on himself in his new memoir. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaranui. Fine today, the chance of showers north of Bay of Islands and about northern Auckland. Frosts overnight, then rain, possibly heavy, spreading south tomorrow. Whanganui to Wellington, fine with overnight frosts. Cloud increasing tomorrow afternoon with scattered evening rain. For Gisborne to Wairarapa, cloudy periods, a few showers about the east coast from Mahia Peninsula northwards. Clearing tonight. Scattered rain tomorrow evening in Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. For Nelson, Buller, Westland and Fiordland, fine at first apart from isolated showers in Fiordland and southern Westland. Rain developing tomorrow afternoon with heavy falls possible. For Marlborough to Southland, fine and frosty overnight, becoming cloudy tomorrow with scattered rain in the evening, possibly falling as sleet in sheltered Otago valleys. And Chatham Islands, cloudy periods with the odd shower. You're with RNZ National, and it is 9 minutes past 5.
Thank you, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Coming up in a few minutes, Ombudsman Peter Boscher and his investigation into Oranga Tamariki. But we begin tonight in the Bay of Plenty, where 2 people are dead and 3 others are seriously injured after a car was hit by a train on a rural crossing. Now, the crash happened near Te Puke shortly after 8 o'clock this morning on Pongakawa Road. Locals have described seeing the car pushed off the tracks by the train, which was travelling south from Mount Maunganui at the time. Our reporter Nita Blake-Person and cameraman Dan Cook have spent much of the day at the scene of the crash. So Nita, what happened there this morning?
Well, it was around 8 o'clock this morning that a car full of 5 people was travelling down Pongakawa School Road here towards State Highway 2 when it was hit by a train on these tracks here. There were 5 people, as I say, in that car. 2 were killed and 3 were seriously injured. Eyewitnesses that RNZ has spoken to say the car was flung about 4 metres off the tracks before it came to a standstill, and the train also came to a halt. Pongakawa School was quick to put out a release confirming that none of its students or staff or community was involved in that crash, but locals in the area have told me they're not surprised at what's happened here today, given the huge amount of traffic that comes here and also the very busy train line. One of those people, local councillor Kevin Marsh, lives about 200 metres from the crash site. He was one of the first on the scene, and earlier today he told me it was not a pleasant scene when he arrived first thing.
Well, it was a car came down the road from down the school road towards the main road, and it was 8 o'clock this morning, and I don't know whether the sun was in his eyes or not, but it's got bells on the crossing. So, and there was good vision. You could see the train coming. If you looked over to his left, he could have seen the train coming, but apparently something went wrong and he didn't see it, and there was 5 people in the car. So you can imagine with a big train doing somewhere probably 80 or k's an hour or better. It wasn't nice.
What did you see when you went over there?
I saw it. I wasn't the first one there, that's for sure, but I did see the people in the car still, and the fire brigade came and they were cutting them out. They had to cut them out, so I left after that. But it wasn't a nice scene.
Pretty horrific stuff for those first responders too?
Oh, police dealing with that must be horrendous, because it's it is not nice, and I just feel so sorry that someone did get killed in it. But I guess my first concern was that it wasn't someone in this area, one of our local people that was full of children. Those guys work in this area. They're kiwifruit workers, I believe. I don't know for sure, but that's what they said they were.
But you understand they're not locals?
They're not locals, or they might live around this area, I don't know, but they're not local people.
Well, there may have been clear line of sight and things like that. There's no arm barriers.
No, there isn't. We've been pushing to try, and we've got arm barriers on Makatu crossing after a fatal accident there, but I guess it takes time. These things take time, and I really haven't seen an accident here, or I can't remember one, a real bad one like this, in my time.
We've been told by some other neighbours that there's a lot more traffic in this area than there ever was before, and they weren't surprised that eventually there had been an accident just with the huge amount of pressure on the roads. Were you surprised? Did you foresee something like this maybe happening?
No, because it's got warning bells on it, and I guess if you look at the warning bells or obey the warning bells, I guess I don't know whether it's foreign drivers or what it is, but you really, you have to ask yourself, I guess.
And that's the Bay of Plenty councillor Kevin Marsh speaking this afternoon. So Nita, what can you tell us about those that are injured?
We heard from the Bay of Plenty District Health Board this afternoon that 2 of those 3 injured people were in a serious condition at Tauranga Hospital, a 27-year-old and a 29-year-old male, both in serious conditions there. The 3rd person had been airlifted to Waikato Hospital. They were in a critical condition, but their gender and age have not been released, nor have the details of those who were killed here today.
Reporter Nita Blake-Person in Te Puke, and if you're wondering, Kiwi Rail has told us that a barrier arm costs about $200,000 to install. The Ombudsman has waded into Oranga Tamariki's practice of removing newborn babies deemed to be at risk, announcing what will be a 3rd inquiry into uplifts. The practice has sparked controversy after Oranga Tamariki staff tried to take a newborn from its mother's room at Hawke's Bay Hospital last month. It is the 3rd inquiry announced into the issue in the last 4 days. Oranga Tamariki is conducting an internal investigation, and the Children's Commissioner has launched a more general general inquiry. Ombudsman Judge Peter Bosher is in our Wellington studio and joins me now. Good evening, Judge Bosher.
Good evening, Lisa.
Without predetermining anything, I'm wondering what is worrying you the most here?
Well, I think that there should be a perception of independence for public confidence. So there are two prime reasons why I've decided to investigate. One is the broader and more coercive powers that are available to me and the sort of gravitas that my office has. And that's pretty relevant to the fact that, look, there have been calls for a Royal Commission of Inquiry. There have been calls for a truly independent inquiry. So I think that what is internally happening by way of Oranga Tamariki review will inform. The Children's Commissioner's review is, of course, limited just to the uplifting of newborn Māori infants. What I want to do is look much more broadly. And the second thing is, and I'm happy to develop this if you wish, we've been given much more authority by Cabinet to conduct a complaints oversight of Oranga Tamariki, and that will result in legislation next year. And I want to get in now to be part of a process of seeing what might have been done better here, why complaints have given rise to so much discontent, and what might be done better for the future.
I just want to get a bit of a baseline here. So there have been calls for a moratorium on uplifts. Do you accept the premise that in some cases it is necessary to take a baby from its family?
Lisa, I'm probably exactly the right person to answer this. I was a family court judge for 25 years and head of the court for 8. There are times when the care of a child needs to be changed from natural parents to someone else, usually members of whānau. It needs to happen to be protective. Yes, I start with a premise that there are times that it needs to happen.
Okay, so if we put that decision to remove to one side and consider the mechanics of the process, what are your initial impressions given what we have seen over the last couple of weeks?
Well, do you mind if what I do is this? I want to start with not giving views and impressions. The reason is that I don't think it's helpful in an investigation for someone like me to say we're going to investigate and at the beginning express views. I want to do it in reverse, Lisa. This is why my office is so respected. I want to start knowing what the concern is. I don't want to comment on aspects of it. I want everyone to feel this will be fair to all, and I'll form views and announce those at the end of the process.
Appreciate that. So, will you look into the reasons for a disproportionately high number of Māori babies being taken away from whānau? Will you try and establish whether that is, as some people perceive, racism or unconscious bias, call it what you will, or something else?
I think what I would prefer to do in the way that we approach this is to see why it's occurring and see whether the process of remedying what's said to be a problem is the correct one. In other words, I don't want to pretend that I myself am a social worker with the answer to all of society's problems. I do want to approach this from the point of view of looking at an agency and seeing whether it's taking into account the right factors and doing its job properly. That is what I think my focus should be.
If you are looking at whether they are taking the right factors into account, you, by, elimination, must be taking into account whether they are considering some wrong factors, like, for example, profiling, racial profiling.
I've got a completely open mind as to whether Oranga Tamariki is operating properly, efficiently, appropriately, culturally. I have a completely open mind on whether they are or they are not. Everything is on the table, and I want everyone who has a concern to feel that they will be listened to. So I want to give you that reassurance. This will be a 6-month investigation. It won't just be a quick in and out, and it will be one that doesn't dissect what happened every minute of every hour of every day on the Hastings case. Others will do that. But I want to feed it into a systemic look at where is New Zealand at on this social issue.
So then, are you going to look at uplifts? Are you going to look at all spectrums of care? Will you look into foster parents and how children are placed? Will you look at the start of the process and the end of the process?
The answer is yes. If a child is in need of care and goes into either a foster placement or grandparental care, and you see that's the interesting thing. Of the many, many children in New Zealand who need to go into care, many live with their grandparents or other members of their family, the greatest number. So what I want to do is work out proportions. This particular case has grabbed the headlines, and I understand that. But with a cool head and an objective way, I want to see to what extent the problem exists and what needs to be done to change this particular aspect of care when there are a lot of others that I also want to look at, and they may or may not be operating as well as they should.
OK, well, you are acutely aware that it is family court judges who sign off on these uplift orders, and your office is not looking into that part of things. It's not part of your power or process. But does someone need to look at that? If we're going to scrutinise the whole process, do we need to make sure that these orders are not given too readily or based on wrong information?
Well, again, I have two answers to that. You'll be acutely conscious that the judiciary is an arm of government which I have no jurisdiction over, and constitutionally I should not. People do not want me interfering with another arm of government. But the second is, inasmuch as courts act on information, if the information being given to courts isn't up to scratch and isn't of the standard that everyone would want it to be, that's an interest of mine, of course it is. And I don't see my looking at that as interfering in any way with the judicial process.
So to be clear, Judge Bosher, you will be looking at the information Oranga Tamariki puts before the court and the veracity of that information when they try to get these orders.
Yes, and the reason I say that is that if Oranga Tamariki has decided that it needs to get a court order, I have an interest in knowing why it's reached that stage. Look, everyone knows that a court order should be one of last resort, and I sense the public concern here was this really necessary? Wasn't there another way? And I have a completely open mind on it and don't wish to now express a view. What I do want to say is I'd like to have a good close look at that.
All right, can I also ask you this then, in your former position as Principal Family Court Judge, and you have said this today publicly, that you've always been aware of the sensitivities around this issue. Well, and you would have signed order papers like this, I'm sure, wouldn't you?
Yes, I have.
OK, so did you ever have reservations about how the system was operating in that job?
I tell you what I did have, and that is enormous concern at the implications of what I was doing. In any case which is coercive, and where you are changing care coercively, every judge is looking at that long and hard and checking their judgment and checking whether what they're doing is the right thing. It's a very, very tough decision to make. I do want you to know that in relation to any decision like that, and for instance, child abduction is another issue where judges know that depending on whether you make an order or you don't, the consequences can be horrendous. So I think judges are conscious, Lisa, that if you don't make an order in a certain situation, and the result of that is that a baby is injured or dies, you've got to wear that. So it's very much a matter of balance when you make an order.
Just before you go then, how much do you think public criticism of Oranga Tamariki or its other iteration, Child, Youth and Family, how much is public criticism weighing on their decision-making process then? Is there a potential for them to be overcautious because of public criticism?
Well, of course there might be. And look, as you know, our motto is fairness to all. And I have to say that I do want this to be a balanced investigation so that there is fairness to all. I would not want, nor would anyone, surely, want Oranga Tamariki not doing its job in protecting children if it's worried about criticism. So I think there's got to be an ability to operate fearlessly, properly, sensitively and culturally, but it's got to be done professionally.
Pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for joining us this evening. That is the Ombudsman, Judge Peter Bosher there, who is starting the third investigation into Oranga Tamariki. It is 23 minutes after 5, and if you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint, and you're with RNZ National. Let us know what you think about that. What elements of his inquiry, which he says will be broad sweeping, should he be looking into? You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Kiwi Rail is promising an investigation into Auckland's rail network after another signalling fault brought trains to a standstill this morning. The latest outage halted trains for almost half an hour just before 8 o'clock, the third such failure in the last 6 months. On Friday afternoon, the same problem stopped trains for more than an hour and a half. Jordan Bond reports.
Some cancellations due to a Kiwi Rail signal system issue.
At 10 to 8 this morning, all Auckland passenger trains stopped and crept towards the nearest station, some forward and some backward. The main power supply to the control centre had failed, as did both backups, rendering the train's signalling system unusable. The fault lasted 28 minutes. KiwiRail's Chief Operating Officer, Todd Moyle, is promising an investigation into this, the third similar shutdown this year.
Oh, look, I'm absolutely apologetic to the travelling public of Auckland, and it isn't unacceptable. We will do a deep investigation and review into this to try and identify any further possible issues and do everything that's within our power to stop this happening again.
This happened last week too, on Friday, for an hour and a half, and there was a similar shutdown in January.
We've got every resource that we can get our hands on at the moment going over this system with a fine-tooth comb to give us the confidence that we're identifying these. Can I give you a 100% guarantee that we won't have another issue? I can't at the moment, but you can rest assured that we're putting all of our efforts into identifying the fault.
Auckland's Mayor Phil Goff says it's unacceptable and disruptive. He says failures like this damage the credibility of public transport as a good option for getting around. He wants answers from KiwiRail and says they have to fix it.
It's simply not good enough to have 2 signal failures within the space of a week. We're trying to get more people onto public transport as a convenient and reliable way of getting around, and these sort of failures on the part of the KiwiRail infrastructure is simply counterproductive as well as disruptive of commuters.
Auckland Transport is essentially the tenant who uses the railways, and KiwiRail is the landlord who owns and maintains them. Auckland Transport says these disruptions are incredibly frustrating for both customers and them, and have asked for an urgent explanation of the problem and solution. University exams are on this week. An Auckland University of Technology student, Matthew Dennis, was on one train when it came to a halt at Hormai Station in South Auckland. Reluctantly, people started getting off the train on the coldest morning of the year.
I was like, okay, I've got an exam in an hour and I've got no means of getting there. So I rang an Uber, and luckily I got there in time, because if I'd have been 10 minutes later, it would have cost me $200. But as it was, it cost me $50 anyway. And being a student, on student loan money, etc., I think it was about 25% of my weekly budget.
Turning up stressed, late and out of pocket, Mr Dennis wants some form of compensation, given this also happened just last week. Auckland University delayed its exams this morning by 15 minutes and says students won't be disadvantaged if they were affected. As for refunds, Auckland Transport says it will repay any affected passengers. I Tamaki Makoto for Checkpoint, called Jordan Bond, aho.
An intermediate school rugby team will have to forfeit any competition points if it keeps allowing a girl to take the field. The principals of 5 other Hawke's Bay intermediate schools have banned Briar Hales from Havelock Intermediate from playing in the boys' first 15. Charlotte Cook reports.
11-year-old Briar Hales has been playing rugby with the boys since she was 5, but this time is the first she's been told to stand down. She's a representative rugby player for the area and is part of the weekly competition, where she is always included with the boys. Havelock North Intermediate Principal Julia Beaumont says there have always been girls in its first 15 team, and other schools have always supported that, but not anymore. The head of Taradale Intermediate, Rex Wilson, who is one of the principals behind the ban, says the decision to separate genders is actually intended to boost the participation of girls in rugby. But one of Briar's coaches, Andy Lovett, says it's not fair when there's no other option to play in a first 15 team.
Us 3 coaches are quite happy just to go and play, and if we don't get any points out of it, we don't get any points out of it. We're not too fussed. It's all about the kids having a game of rugby and having fun, isn't it? That's what we look at.
Andy Lovett says the boys haven't yet decided if they will take a stand and let Briar play, effectively forfeiting their competition. Kiwi Ferns captain Honey Hirami says she hopes the boys will do so, because at this age it should be about inclusiveness and having fun.
I'd just like to, encourage other young girls that find themselves in those situations to speak up. It's really good that Briar's dad brought this to the media attention and let New Zealand public know, because we should speak up in these situations and support this young girl who really just wants to play the game that she loves, which is rugby.
A written statement to RNZ signed by the principals of all 6 schools involved in the competition says boys play 15s and girls only play 7s because some schools haven't been able to field a female 15-a-side team. They say they aren't opposed to making changes, but it's too late this season, as the competition is already underway. The Green Party spokesperson for Sport and Recreation, Marama Davidson, says schools are out of touch.
It's a massive backward step, this decision. It doesn't send a good message for sports in general, for all children to be involved in sports. And it just seems like it goes against current practice all around the country.
Marama Davison says it's clear the decision wasn't motivated by a concern for Briar's safety, because she's already heavily involved in school rugby, a sport which girls have been playing with the boys for decades. This is Charlotte Cook.
Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, Donald Trump officially launches his 2020 re-election campaign. A geological treasure trove described as New Zealand's Pompeii gets a stay of execution, and a family of 6 who lived in a 1-bedroom unit for 4 years finally gets a new home. We would love to hear from you on anything you've heard on the program today, but I'm particularly interested in what you think of the ban on Briar Hales, who is the young lady playing in the first 15 rugby team in Hawke's Bay. A whole bunch of principals reckon she shouldn't play in a mixed team with boys. What do you think? Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's go to the headlines now with Susanna.
The families of 3 road workers killed near Whakatane in February are angry about what they say is lenient sentencing of a truck driver who pleaded guilty to careless driving. In Whakatane District Court this afternoon, David Michael Cox was ordered to pay $21,000 in emotional harm reparation, do 250 hours of community work, and was disqualified for 21 months. His vehicle struck another truck, which rolled into a culvert, killing Dudley Soliuraroa, David Reginald Te Weda Eparaima, and Haki Graham Hiha. The Ombudsman says his investigation into Oranga Tamariki taking babies deemed at risk from their mothers will be different from 2 other inquiries. Oranga Tamariki is holding an internal inquiry into its attempt to remove a newborn at Hawke's Bay Hospital last month, and the Children's Commissioner will carry out a more general inquiry. Peter Boscher says his will be a more wide-ranging probe and will look at whether Oranga Tamariki is intervening in an appropriate way, as well as its interaction with other agencies. 2 people are dead and 3 injured after their car was hit by a train near the intersection of State Highway 2 and Pongakawa School Road south of Tauranga this morning. 2 of the 3 injured people are men in their late 20s from Tauranga. All 3 are in hospital, with 1 person in intensive care. Kiwi Rail is promising to look into Auckland's rail network after a signal failure brought trains to a standstill during peak hour this morning. The power failure stopped all trains for almost half an hour just before 8 o'clock. It was the 3rd outage this year. On Friday afternoon, the same problem stopped trains for more than an hour and a half. The Conservation Department will lead work to clean up rubbish after the Fox River landfill burst open during floods on the west coast. Conservation Minister Eugenie Sage has announced DOC will replace the Westland District Council as the lead agency today. Ms Sage says heavy machinery is required to remove log jams and more volunteers will be needed. Those are the latest news headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thank you, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Let's go to business news now with Nona Peltier, who's joined me in the studio. Nona, I'm resisting every pun in the book here, so let's just play it straight. Cannabis Company has had its stock exchange debut today.
That's right, and you don't want to talk about its highs, I guess.
I see what you did there, Nona.
1 cent over its issue price is where it opened at 51 cents.
Okay.
But then it sort of sunk from there, down to as low as 36 cents, recovered a little bit at the close at 40 cents, which is 20% down from the issue price, if you were keeping track of the numbers I threw out there. So 20% down from the issue price, you might ask why?
Yes. Do you have an answer for us, Nona?
I kind of do. So analysts looking at the offer weren't that impressed with it. Here's a company that has no revenue. It is operating under no regulations. And of course, it has no license because the regulations are yet to come. This is a company that's going to be making or hoping to make medicinal cannabis products. So the regulations will come eventually. We're expecting them within the year. And then, of course, the company will have to apply for a license. In the meantime, it's made no money at all. It's got no products to sell because it would be illegal to sell any, and it's not licensed to make them. And so, of course, analysts had some question marks about this. This is a high-risk venture. Why on earth would anyone ever pay 50 cents a share for the company? Of course, some people were willing to pay that, and others were not. And so, in the end, the share price sank, and we'll see what happens. It's only a share price. It's this company's in it for the long haul, and so we'll see what happens in the future. But their offer, they were the first company to list on the exchange.
I was going to say they're betting on kind of first mover status, aren't they? Here,
yes.
That's the kind of attraction that they're trying to sell.
Yes, they're the first company of its kind to list on the NZX. It's the first company to list on the NZX this year, and I can tell you, I was speaking with the NZX, and they were absolutely delighted on both fronts. So whatever the share price, who cares, right?
Rest of the market, shall we do a whip around?
Amazing. It rose, the NZX Top 50 Index rose 1.1% today by 114 points to 10,305. And Lisa, I'll let you know that is a record high.
I was going to say, is that a record?
It is.
Okay.
And our Kiwi dollar is trading at 65.3 US cents, just a touch under 95 cents Australian and 52 British pence.
Oh, slightly up on the British pence.
Yes, the markets are looking hot because the...
do they like Boris? Boris Johnson.
But Boris so much. They like what the central banks are talking, which could be interest rate cuts, not just in the United States, which we'll hear from the U.S. Federal Reserve, I guess, tomorrow, but also in Europe. There's some sense that there could be an easing there. And locally, we're going to have the GDP economic numbers tomorrow for you.
Thanks for the business highs and lows, Nona. Nona Pelsier with your business update this afternoon. And to overseas now, Donald Trump has officially launched his 2020 re-election campaign in front of thousands of supporters in Florida. He claimed the United States was booming because of the team he'd put in place and used the Mueller report and the so-called fake news as rallying points. Latest polls have Mr. Trump well behind in a contest with the top Democratic contender, Joe Biden. But in 2016, he started the campaign as a rank outsider, and today he heralded the beginning of a political movement that has made the US great again. The ABC's Connie Aegis was there.
Inside a sporting arena filled with thousands of screaming supporters, dressed in a striking canary yellow jumpsuit, the First Lady, Melania Trump, was the first to speak.
It has been my honour to serve as First Lady of this incredible country for the past 2 years. And I'm excited to do it for 6 more.
She quickly introduced her husband,
the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
Fired up, Donald Trump told the crowd that the United States was in good shape because of his leadership.
Our country is now thriving, prospering, and booming. And frankly, it's soaring to incredible new heights. Our economy is the envy of the world, perhaps the greatest economy we've had in the history of our country.
Boasting he'd come good on his promise to drain the swamp in Washington.
This was our chance to reclaim our government from a permanent political class that enriched itself at your expense. As I said, on a wonderful, beautiful day at my inauguration, we did not merely transfer power from one party to another, but we transferred power back to you, the proud citizens of the United States of America.
It was a message that appeared to resonate with those in the audience. The president used the rally to take aim at his enemies, both real and perceived. Not surprisingly, the Mueller investigation into allegations of collusion with Russia during his last election campaign was labelled as a witch hunt.
The only collusion was committed by the Democrats, the fake news media and their operatives, and the people who funded the phony dossier, crooked Hillary Clinton and the DNC. It was all an illegal attempt to overturn the results of the election, spy on our campaign, which is what they did, and subvert our democracy. Remember the insurance policy, just in case Hillary Clinton lost. Remember the insurance policy.
Russia also came up later in his speech.
Nobody's been tougher on Russia than Donald Trump. Nobody.
His tone has changed little during the course of his presidency. Few olive branches were on display, and he signalled journalists for a special mention.
You know, I said, this is a very big arena. For a Tuesday night, I said, you know, if we have about 3 or 4 empty seats, the fake news will say headlines. He didn't fill up the arena, you know.
Vice President Mike Pence later took the stage, encouraging people to vote for Donald Trump.
But to keep America great, we have to re-elect a president who's been fighting for you every day. We've done so much, but there's much more to do.
US Vice President Mike Pence ending that report from Connie Aegis in Orlando, Florida. Well, our earlier story on Briar Hales, who's the young woman who is playing in the first 15 rugby team in Hawke's Bay, at Hawke's Bay Intermediate. She's being banned from playing in that mixed team. She plays with boys on that team. That's really got a few of you hot under the collar. We're getting a bit of feedback on that. There's about half a dozen principals who don't want her to play in that mixed team in that first 15. Graham says the principals of the schools who will not let this girl play rugby should not be leading schools. Another piece of feedback, my son played against 3 girls last year. The only issue he had was stopping them because they were so good. Come on, the Bay, get over yourselves. Maybe that's it. Maybe she's too good and they just don't want her in the team. And Bernadine has got in contact and says, sounds to me as though the objecting schools are just using the fact that it's a girl as an excuse to get rid of a really good player in an opposing team. Wonder about that. We'll get to more of your feedback a little later. Stats New Zealand is partnering with cell phone companies to launch a new way of tracking people's movements every hour. But the Finance Minister, Grant Robertson, and Statistics Minister, James Shaw, says people's privacy is a priority. They say the pilot wouldn't be rolled out if they weren't confident personal privacy would be protected. The population density pilot will launch next month and will inform emergency planning and the tourism sector, among other things. Our political reporter, Joe Moyer, has the story.
James Shaw says cell phone and credit companies already hold the level of detail that will be tracked. But for the first time, Stats NZ is able to act as a data broker to create trends and patterns with the anonymised information. The Chief Statistician, Liz McPherson, told MPs at Select Committee today that the data will provide Stats NZ with information on an hourly basis.
The product that we are looking to be launching in July is a population density product, which will allow you to see the movement of people between parts of a city, between parts of a region, on an hourly basis.
Drew Broadley works for Data Ventures, a business unit within Stats NZ that has been working on the pilot, but says he can't divulge the telco companies involved because it's commercially sensitive.
The point is to effectively get that data anonymised, aggregated from the telcos before we receive it, bring that together and absolutely be able to tell where people are, but no identifying features of those people, just at a point in time.
Grant Robertson says a lot of water needs to go under the bridge before the pilot will be rolled out in full. Asked whether trust had eroded in the government's ability to keep data safe, given Treasury's systems had been breached ahead of the budget, this was his response.
One of the things we do take really seriously is data security and data privacy. Clearly from time to time that can be breached, but that is part and parcel of any decision to go ahead with something like this, would be that there were adequate privacy measures in place.
But at the same time, the government has to keep up with technology. Although Mr Robertson also pointed to the failures of the census moving to an online format as a reason to be cautious.
Technology does change over time, and we've moved from the only paper-based census to some electronic. Clearly there are issues we need to deal with there. So it'll take some time, but technology does move and we have to move with it.
Mr Broadley says the pilot, which has been assessed by the Privacy Commissioner, will provide valuable data in a more timely manner.
For things like emergency planning, just being able to understand the difference of people in the area at 3 a.m. in the morning versus 3 p.m. People don't have that information, so it's really, really important to be able to understand for planning of evacuation. There's also a need around tourism because there's the transparency of people entering the country, but the number of people in the areas with tourism and natural attractions, they don't understand how many people are coming into those areas at that time.
Mr Shaw acknowledged the perception issues around people feeling tracked with such a pilot, but says Stats NZ is more than up to the job of keeping personal details safe.
It is very rigorous, and we've had criticism in the past of people saying it's really difficult to get access to that information to be able to use it for research purposes. Well, that's because it's under such a lock and key.
Mr Shaw says there might come a point around 2030 when a traditional census isn't needed, but data collection isn't yet good enough. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jo Moyer.
Tonight, we've got a bit of an update on a story we brought you a few weeks ago. Now, that's of a family on the State House waiting list. 6 of them, including a sick baby, were jammed into a one-bedroom private rental unit. That was despite medical advice saying that the accommodation was unsuitable. They'd been waiting on and off for 4 years. Well, good news for them, the wait is finally over. They've made it into a state house. Just a reminder, it's a working family bringing in around $44,000 a year, and they're struggling to pay the $365 a week for their private rental. Their youngest child recently had meningitis, and that prompted Middlemore Hospital to write a letter saying that the family's overcrowded conditions were putting the baby's recovery at risk. But after Checkpoint got involved, MSD admitted it had overlooked the hospital letter, and as a consequence, the family's priority rating jumped up 2 notches. Well, today I went with cameraman Nick Monroe to see the family at their new South Auckland house. We have just arrived outside the family's new house, and so you can get a bit of an idea of what I'm looking at here. It's what I imagined, a traditional state house. It's weatherboard, it's very clean and tidy looking from the outside, a sort of grey green paint colour. I think there's 2 bedrooms facing out to the road, identical sets of windows, and I look around and someone's been hard at work here because there's a lot of new fencing. Remember, this is a family that's got 4 young kids, and in the front yard, freshly mown lawns and a giant tree. Let's go and see what inside is like. A front porch with a neat row of pint-sized shoes shows they've already got a foothold here. Hello. Hi. So this is your new house.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Can I come in?
Come in.
Just take my shoes off.
Okay.
Okay, so first impressions, and I've got to keep my voice down because the baby's just having a nap, is the carpet appears to be new. There's the smell of new paint and possibly, well, carpet cleaning. Apparently there was a sign that said they had done pest control in the house as well. Some of the walls seem to be freshly painted. It's very clean and tidy, and there are curtains on all of the windows as well, and I'm told that insulation is going into the property in the roof and underfloor, and that should happen in the next couple of weeks.
What's also new for this family is the space to spread out, play and sleep even. These young brothers have gone from bouncing off the walls to just bouncing on the tramp in their very own backyard. Their delight is infectious. Mum describes this house, their house, as a miracle. What do you think of your new house?
Oh my gosh, it's a dream come true to our family. We are very happy and we are so excited about our house. It's a big house and it's a big place for us and the kids.
Remind us, how much did you pay at the other unit where you were staying? What was the rent there?
It's $365.
And what about now that you've got this house?
It's now 221 yeah.
And what does that mean for you?
It's more helpful for my partner too.
More left over?
Yeah.
For the power and the food?
He's got some extra help for us.
A reminder, they've come from a one-bedroom unit of about 60 metres square. Dad and the older 3 boys often slept in the lounge together, meaning his 4 a.m. wake-up call was everybody's wake-up call. So when the alarm goes off at 4 in the morning for you to go to work,
yes,
your boys wake up?
Everyone's wake up.
A recent cut in overtime hours sent the family's income plummeting, but with no corresponding rise up the State House waiting list. And for Dad, the weight of responsibility was crushing.
Sometimes my partner ring me to come home. I told her, I can't come home. I don't want my kids to struggle. I don't want them to stay with no food.
After Checkpoint got involved, the Ministry of Social Development admitted it had overlooked a hospital letter, noting the baby of the house had suffered meningitis and the family's overcrowded conditions were putting his recovery at risk. The family's priority was reassessed and raised, and here we are in their new lounge.
This is the first room.
Oh, and we'll be quiet because baby is asleep.
Yeah, this is and 6 room. They share this room. That's their beds. Yeah.
New beds?
New beds.
And their very own room?
Their very own room.
Bedroom number 2?
Yeah, number 2, bedroom number 2. This is for and
right.
Yeah, they share their beds.
So you've got some brand new bunk beds?
Yeah, that's another brand new bed.
So MSD helped you with to get some beds for the boys?
Yes.
And it must be a bit of an adventure for them to learn to sleep in their own rooms.
Yes, not really familiar and not really get used to sleep on their own bed. And this is the number 3 bedroom.
Number 3?
Yes, this is our room.
Did you imagine that you would live in a house with 3 bedrooms? You hoped?
No, I didn't. I didn't imagine I can stay and live in this nice and big bedroom now.
Does it feel like home already?
Feel like home now. I can make it my home now. This is my home. And especially my family, especially the boys, they like it. They're very happy. They're more excited. Coming after school, oh, welcome. They always say, hi Mom, welcome to our home. They always say, my older one, he's happy. He say, oh, I'm more happy to come home. Not like the old place. So he just come and straight in his room and play with his stuff. And then, it's a miracle. It's there.
You feel like it's a miracle?
Yes. Oh. Finally, I got a home and I'm very happy, excited.
We move into the backyard. It's flat and fenced, and if you're 5 or under, it's practically a stadium and an endless opportunity to explore your prospects as a rugby player, frisbee thrower, acrobat, or all of the above. Along for the tour is social worker Alistair Russell from the Mangere East Family Service Centre. He fought for this family to get a house.
The end result for this family is absolutely amazing. It's taken a large amount of work. It's taken some pushing to get both Housing New Zealand and Work and Income to come to the party.
So when they looked back at this case, they find the letter and they bump the family up a couple of notches on the waiting list. And I suppose the reality of that is that they then leapfrog someone else who's on the waiting list. Yeah. So it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? There's still 11-odd thousand people waiting in the queue.
That's the reality, is that what we have done is, for want of a better phrase, queue jumped this family to the top of the list and got a great result for this family, but there are 11,000 plus other families who are still in very similar situations with very similar needs, who won't have access to that advocacy, they won't have the media coverage, they won't be getting into housing anytime soon.
Right now, for this family, a new roof over their heads makes them feel the sky is the limit. And it is now about 7 minutes away from 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Let us know what you think about that. There's still 11,000 odd people on the State House waiting list, and the wait, as we told you there, is long. You can text us on 2101, you can tweet us at checkpointrnz, or email is good too, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. A geological treasure trove described as New Zealand's Pompeii has been granted a stay of execution after the company behind a controversial plan to mine the site went into receivership. Plarman Resources had planned to mine diatomite from the 23-million-year-old crater lake at Fulden Mar near Middlemarch, but the plan led to a local uproar and now appears to be scuppered. Our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown has the story.
For many, including Otago locals, the scientific significance of Fulden Mar, about an hour's drive from Dunedin, was completely unknown until earlier this year. That's when a confidential report from Goldman Sachs detailing Plarman Resources' plans for mining the site entered the public arena. It suggested the company would strip all the diatomite from the area and in the process destroy an ancient record of fossils and climate change data. Enter former Prime Minister Helen Clark, who added her voice to the opposition and called for its permanent preservation. Locals Andrea Bosshard and Shane Loader have led the fight against the mine for the past year. Mr Loader says they are pleased mining won't take place in the short term.
We're happy to hear that, but in a funny way, I'm not hugely surprised because I don't think it was ever a viable proposition to mine the diatomite at Fulden Mar.
But Ms Bosshard says the fight isn't over.
In a way, this is the start of a whole other story, which is about how do we now protect that site in perpetuity for future generations, and that there is an absolute ban on all mining of that area except for the work that scientists now and scientists in the future do.
Dunedin Mayor Dave Cull, who initially supported the mine before retracting that and calling for preservation of the Mar, says the council's recent opposition was never about defeating Plarman Resources, and the receivership is unfortunate for the company. But the council's focus remains on achieving the preservation of Fulden Mar for perpetuity. Strathtyre Community Board Chair Barry Williams, who was on the fence about the mine proposal, says Plarman isn't the first company to fall over attempting to mine the diatomite.
Yeah, like I've lived Middlemarch all my life, and it's at least the fourth one that I've seen. This will be the fourth lot that I've had a go at it and nothing's happened. And I think I said right at the start that I doubted it would ever get off the ground.
A community meeting in opposition to mining the Mar is scheduled for next Tuesday night. Opponents say the focus of that meeting will now change, but it'll still go ahead. Attempts to contact the company were unsuccessful. Receivers Quarter say they were called in by Plarman after the company encountered funding difficulties when its application to the Overseas Investment Office to buy an adjoining farm to the mine took longer than expected. Quarter says it's considering its options, ranging from recapitalisation to a potential full or partial sale of the company's assets. In Dunedin, for Checkpoint, Timothy Brown.
Facebook has revealed its long-awaited cryptocurrency plans, announcing Project Libra, a new type of digital money designed for billions of people using its apps and social network. If the plan is successful, users will soon be able to shop with and send the currency on Messenger and Instagram, as well as use it with a wide variety of other merchants, like Uber, Spotify and MasterCard. Facebook say they hope Libra will be available mid-2020. The BBC's Fahana Dawood reports.
According to Facebook, Libra will be accessible to anyone with a smartphone and data connectivity. It's designed to let people save, send or spend money as easily as texting. Libra will be managed independently by a group of companies, including Facebook, called the Libra Association. Payments are likely to eventually be accepted by all the group's members, which include MasterCard, PayPal, eBay, Spotify, Uber and Vodafone. The transactions would be at low to no cost, although Facebook will charge a small commission on payments made through its platforms. It's thought this could be the future for Facebook and the future of money. But the biggest test is likely to be whether people will trust Facebook enough to start changing their cash for Libra, a question I put to people in central London.
Very unlikely, because it's Facebook and I just don't like Facebook. Anything to do with Facebook, that's Instagram, WhatsApp, it's to do with Facebook. I don't like what they do with your information.
I wouldn't use Libra at all because I use Apple Pay for everything and I don't need any other kind of form of cash and I don't trust Facebook.
I'd probably look at one of my kids starting up first and see how they got on, and if they got on and paddled well, then probably I would then think, okay, I better not get left behind as a dinosaur, maybe I'll give it a go.
Libra is aimed at the close to 2 billion adults worldwide who do not have a bank account but could perhaps easily get a Facebook account. Facebook says the issue of being unbanked disproportionately affects people in developing countries and in particular women. While the currency already has the green light to launch in the United States, it's unclear what will happen in places such as India, which has recently clamped down on digital currencies.
And that's for Hannah Darwood reporting, and it seems Facebook could run into problems. US lawmakers are asking it to stop the development of the Libra currency until Congress and regulators can review it. Hey, let me know what you think about that. Will you be cashing in on Facebook's cryptocurrency?
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Lei a tawa tēnei. The families of 3 road workers killed near Whakatane in February are angry about what they say is lenient sentencing of a truck driver who pleaded guilty to careless driving. In Whakatane District Court this afternoon, David Michael Cox was ordered to pay $21,000 in emotional harm reparation, do 250 hours of community work, and was disqualified for 21 months. His vehicle struck another truck, which rolled into a culvert, killing Dudley Sole Raroa, David Reginald Te Wera Eparaima, and Haki Graham Hiha. Outside court, Mr. Eparaima's brother, Todd, expressed his unhappiness with the sentence.
This is not what the land. We don't agree with it. The people have to pay for taking through life.
Todd Eparaima, whose brother was one of the 3 men killed. Everything Oranga Tamariki does will be up for scrutiny in the Ombudsman's 6-month-long inquiry into the agency. Judge Peter Bosher is to investigate Oranga Tamariki's practice of removing newborn babies deemed to be at risk. The practice has sparked controversy after the department tried to take a newborn from its mother's room at Hawke's Bay Hospital last month. Judge Bosher told Checkpoint he has a completely opened mind about the Oranga Tamariki and how it's operating. He says he will also scrutinise the information put before judges when they're asking for permission to remove a child.
If Oranga Tamariki has decided that it needs to get a court order, I have an interest in knowing why it's reached that stage. Look, everyone knows that a court order should be one of last resort, and I sense the public concern here was this really necessary?
Peter Bosher says he will not be looking at the family court's decisions because constitutional separations of power mean he has no oversight over the judiciary. There are also 2 other investigations. Oranga Tamariki is carrying out an internal investigation into the attempted removal of the newborn baby in Hawke's Bay, while the Children's Commissioner will carry out a more general inquiry into the practice of removing Māori babies. The Auckland Mayor is demanding answers over the second rail shutdown in a week, this time during morning rush hour. All Auckland passenger trains were halted this morning after a power supply failure which affected signals. Kiwi Rail is investigating the incident but says it can't rule out happening again. Mayor Phil Goff says failures like this damage the credibility of public transport as a good option for travelling.
It's simply not good enough to have 2 signal failures within the space of a week. We're trying to get more people onto public transport as a convenient and reliable way of getting around, and these sort of failures on the part of the Kiwi Rail infrastructure is simply counterproductive as well as disruptive of commuters.
Auckland Mayor Phil Goff. Wellington's Port Company has been ordered to pay almost $700,000 over the death of a worker who fell off a roof. The District Court has fined Centreport more than $500,000. The company also has to pay more than $150,000 in reparation to the man's family. WorkSafe says there were numerous health and safety failings that led to the death in January 2017. Tehi Whanga was using a ladder to get up on the roof of the container repair facility. He fell and hit his head on the concrete below. Spokesperson Simon Humphreys says the ladder was not properly secured and there was no edge or fall protection. Mr Humphreys says the accident was foreseeable and avoidable. It's 4 minutes past 6. With just one at the Cricket World Cup, a wounded South Africa are a dangerous side, says Black Caps batting coach Craig McMillan. The two sides square off in Birmingham tonight, with the win putting New Zealand on the verge of a semi-final spot, while the Proteas need a win to simply stay alive.
They haven't perhaps had the start to the tournament that they were after, which I think perhaps makes them even more dangerous. So we're very wary of them because we know the quality of the players that they have in that setup.
Craig McMillan. The match starts at 9:30 tonight. Ben Smith's timing is as immaculate as ever for the Highlanders, who have included the fit again All Blacks fullback in their team to play the Crusaders in the Super Rugby quarterfinals. Smith has recovered from the hamstring injury that threatened to prematurely end his Highlanders career and will start in Friday's match in Christchurch. Coach Aaron Major says his presence in the side can't be underestimated.
His influence in this side is massive for what he can do on the field in terms of his actions, but just inspires people with his energy.
Aaron Major. Lebanon Rugby League players, led by West Tigers Robbie Farah, are threatening to boycott Saturday's test against Fiji over a stoush with the Lebanon Rugby League Federation. The Cedars players are at odds with the national body over the running of the game and intended taping over the governing body's logo on their jerseys. The LRLF responded by threatening the players with legal action, but the players now say they'll strike unless their demands are met. That's the news.
Tonight on Night, Simon Morris reviews the latest Men in Black movie. Hamish Mackey talks about efforts to make urban space more pedestrian-friendly down at Mangere Town Centre. Dr. Damien Scarf on how you gauge a homing pigeon's IQ in the wild. Marie Verscher and John Rankin discuss the merits of trams without tracks. And we revive a classic radio adaptation of Morris G's greatest novel, Plum, on Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaranui. Fine today, but the chance of showers north of Bay of Islands and about northern Auckland. Frosts overnight, then rain, possibly heavy, spreading south tomorrow. Whanganui to Wellington, fine with overnight frosts. Cloud increasing tomorrow afternoon with scattered evening rain. Gisborne to Wairarapa, cloudy periods, a few showers about the east coast from Mahia Peninsula northwards, clearing tonight. Scattered rain tomorrow evening in Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. For Nelson, Buller, Westland and Fiordland, fine at first apart from isolated showers in Fiordland and southern Westland. Rain developing tomorrow afternoon with heavy falls possible. For Marlborough to Southland, fine and frosty overnight, becoming cloudy tomorrow with scattered rain in the evening possible, falling as sleet in sheltered Otago valleys. And for Chatham Islands, cloudy periods with the odd shower. You're with RNZ National. It's 7 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. And if you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. A judge has described the actions of a truck driver who killed 3 road workers in the Bay of Plenty as an all-too-human momentary failure. David Michael Cox was today sentenced to 250 hours community work, disqualified from driving for 21 months and ordered to pay $21,000 in emotional harm reparation to the victims' families. As Matthew Tunison reports, many family members of the dead men are angry at what they say is a lenient sentence.
I was told by the bloody police this was before his sentencing. He would never go to jail. He would never see inside a bloody jail. But me, if I swore in that court, I'll see inside a bloody jail. I will. But he will never see inside one. Why not? He killed 3 innocent people.
Devastated, angry and grieving, dozens of the men's whānau packed into the Whakatane District Court to hear the sentence passed down to the man who killed their loved ones. David Michael Cox, his head bowed throughout the emotional sentencing, had earlier pleaded guilty to 3 charges of careless driving causing death. On a sunny February afternoon, he was doing a routine delivery of some furniture from Tauranga to Whakatane when his vehicle swiped a truck which had a sign on it indicating roadworks were taking place. The force of the collision shunted the truck forward before it overturned, killing Dudley Soliraroa, David Reginald Te Wera Eparaima and Haki Graham Hiha, who were in a roadside culvert. Judge Peter Rollo said Cox had misjudged the distance between the 2 trucks by just 20 centimetres.
The 3 men had been standing beside the truck. They were crushed by the vehicle overturning on them. A very tragic situation. Undoubtedly, they would have thought that the measures they took to highlight their position with the work they were doing would have been adequate to keep them safe and secure, but it was not to be.
Judge Rollo said Cox was an experienced driver. He had unimpeded visibility of 450 metres or so, and he was seated in an elevated position in his truck. It should have been an ordinary passing manoeuvre.
This was a terrible and tragic accident. It was not a deliberate or even a reckless act. It was regrettably an all-too-human momentary failure. An inexplicable lapse of concentration by you that we all experience from time to time. It's part of the human condition that we occasionally make mistakes, fortunately not with such grave consequences as in this instance.
The judge said Messrs Raroa, Eparaima and Hiha were men of mana who were highly respected and loved by their families.
The consequences for the men are obvious. For their family and whānau, their friends, workmates and the community, it has been tragic, devastating and immensely sad. They struggle to understand how the events could have happened and their loved ones snatched from them, from life, from the promise indeed of a new niece for one family born that very morning, yet to be held and marvelled at by one of those deceased men.
Cox's lawyer, Tony Baum, said his client, who was also injured in the crash, struggled to explain why he committed this error of judgment. He fully accepted responsibility.
There are also, as you'll see from the pre-sentence report, mental health issues because he is suffering from depression, recurrent nightmares. Wife expresses through the probation officer her concerns about his ongoing ability to cope with the consequences of his action.
Speaking outside of court, Mr Eparaima's brother, Todd, expressed his unhappiness with the sentence.
Look at whatever happened was never going to replace our brother. Or the other 2, but this is not the law of the land. We don't agree with it. Because the people have to pay for taking this life.
The court was told that Cox was not in a good financial position, but would sell his car to pay reparation for the families, which he had offered to be $21,000. In Whakatane for Checkpoint, call Matthew Tunis and Tene.
A third inquiry into Oranga Tamariki's practice of removing newborn children from their mothers is now underway, this time by the Ombudsman. Peter Bosch's investigation will focus on the ministry's interactions with agencies like district health boards and also whether the uplifts are being carried out in an appropriate way. It follows Oranga Tamariki's internal investigation into the attempted uplift of a newborn from its mother at Hawke's Bay Hospital last month and a more general inquiry by the Children's Commissioner, and that's into uplifts of Māori babies. Anusha Bradley has the story.
2 weeks ago, I notified Oranga Tamariki that I intend to undertake a wide-ranging investigation into the steps that the agency takes when removing newborn children under a court order. And Chair and members of the committee, today I'll publicly announce this investigation.
Another day, another inquiry into Oranga Tamariki's practice of removing newborn babies deemed to be at risk. Announcing his investigation at Parliament's Governance and Administration Select Committee, Peter Bosch says his inquiry will be different from 2 other investigations announced in the last 4 days.
There's a lot of concern and justifiable concern about this and what's given rise to it. The second thing is, some people have called for a royal commission. Others have said that what's happening isn't truly independent. We are truly independent. So we've decided that with the broad powers and functions we've got, we're the right people to take into account what others are doing, but have a broader reach ourselves. So that's why we've decided to do it.
As a former principal family court judge, Peter Boscher says he's very aware of the sensitivities around uplifts. The Minister for Children, Tracy Martin, says she's thrilled at the Ombudsman's inquiry.
Here's a gentleman, one that has an immense amount of mana. He can pull in oversight across all, the Children's Commissioner, Oranga Tamariki's internal review. He just has the capacity that we need, I think.
But the New Zealand First MP doesn't think 3 inquiries into Oranga Tamariki's uplift practices means the public has lost confidence in the agency.
Actually, no, I don't. It's really interesting. I mean, members of the public are dropping off cakes and sausage rolls and things to our offices around the country to just acknowledge that our social workers do a really hard job.
National Party leader Simon Bridges says while the removal of babies from their mothers is harrowing and tragic, he hopes the inquiries into Oranga Tamariki might improve things.
Well, obviously now there's not 1, not 2, but 3 reviews or inquiries. It's for them to look into, but I'd be very surprised if they didn't find that there weren't things that could be improved.
Following the attempted uplift of a newborn from Hawke's Bay Hospital in May, District Health Board member Jacoby Polaine broke ranks by saying she believed her DHB had failed in its duty of care to the 19-year-old mother. She called for the Ombudsman to investigate and is now heartened that he has the role that District Health Boards play in the removal of babies in his sites.
DHBs have policies and protocols and practices surrounding child protection matters. They are a part of a pipeline of notifications to Oranga Tamariki, and that whole pipeline needs to be looked at.
The Ombudsman aims to report his findings by the end of the year. In Napier for Checkpoint, Anusha Bradley.
It is almost 16 minutes past 6. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Principals at high decile schools have warned MPs that they are tackling problems like incest and drug addiction, and they shouldn't be excluded from the government's policy of scrapping donations. 2 Tauranga schools told a select committee that excluding decile 8, 9 and 10 schools from the $75 million a year scheme that scraps voluntary donations is unfair and inequitable. Here's our education correspondent, John Gerritsen.
From next year, the government will pay schools $150 per child if they don't ask for a donation, but only in deciles 1 through 7. High decile schools are excluded. Andrew King from Decile 9 Oropi School told the Education and Workforce Select Committee that wrongly assumes high decile schools do not have disadvantaged families. He says his school has nearly 350 children and it's helping about 50 or 60 with some serious problems.
Families dealing with suicide, sexual abuse, incest, physical abuse, domestic issues involving the police, a drug-related issue last week involving the police, custody issues. We are feeding children breakfast at school and we are supporting families facing financial hardship. Yes, less students, but we still have those issues in a high decile school.
Andrew King says his school gets $12,000 a year in donations, but would receive $48,000 if the government's policy was extended to high decile schools. He agrees low decile schools deserve more funding than high decile ones, but says the new donation policy is wrong.
It is not addressing inequity. It's not a positive step forward for all children in whānau. Marginalised people in high decile communities are missing out. High decile communities do have marginalised children and families.
Matt Simeon from Decile 8 Pillins Point School told the committee about half of its families pay the school's $100 annual donation, totalling about $25,000 a year. He says that's $50,000 less than the school would get under the new donation policy, and it could fall even further.
A number of parents have kind of expressed their disappointment to it also, saying, well, why would I bother paying our donation? So there's potential as we could actually get less donations because parents in the community are saying, look, if it's actually free or being paid for in other schools, why would we pay for it here in this school?
Decile numbers are based on the proportion of a school's children who come from the poorest neighbourhoods. Matt Simeon says that's a problem because even though his school is high decile, many of its families are in low-income jobs and sharing accommodation with relatives.
A decile and the affluence of the cost of real estate around your school does not represent the clientele or the people that make up your school.
Matt Simeon says the government should consider paying high decile schools an amount between their current donation earnings and what they'd get from the $150 per child scheme. The Education Minister, Chris Hipkins, says the policy might be extended to high decile schools in future.
Over time, our goal is to ensure that cost is not a barrier for anybody. We have to start somewhere. Decile 1 to 7 is a reasonably significant start, I think. And then, in time we'll get to look at the decile 8, 9 and 10 schools again, I'm sure.
Until then, it seems that higher decile schools will have to keep asking parents for donations and hoping that they'll pay up. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko John Gerrits in TNA.
A man accused of murdering a young father in Mangere says he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Fisilau Tapaivalu is on trial with his cousin, Mesui Tufui, in the High Court in Auckland. They've denied murdering Abraham Tuuhiava and trying to murder his wife. Our court reporter, Annika Smith, filed this report.
Abraham Tuuhiava was shot dead and his wife Yolanda severely injured on Mangare's Greenwood Road last year. It's the Crown's case the pair were lured to the rural stretch under the pretence of a drug deal and shot after a hit was allegedly ordered by the Comancheros gang in Australia. Today, a softly spoken Fisilau Tapaivalu told the court he was dealing methamphetamine with his cousin Tane at the time. The court heard Tane was patched and Mr Tapaivalu wanted to join the gang.
I would hang around with Tane, who was connected to the Comancheros. I never had direct contact with any of the other Comanchero members.
Mr Tapaivalu admits being there the night Abraham Tuuhiava was shot dead, but denies knowing about a plot to kill him. He placed himself, Mesui Tufui and Viliami Tane at Greenwood Road for the drug deal, but says he dozed off in the car.
I heard a loud bang. I looked over and I seen the back of Mesui just in front of the car in front of us. I turned the radio down and tried to listen up if I could hear anything else.
He said Mr Tufui came running towards the car with a shotgun and Tane returned a few minutes later.
He told me just to drive. I just pulled out and drove.
Mr Tapaivalu said he saw a body on the side of the road and quickly looked away. He said Tane shouted at him to stop the car.
He told me that he thinks he dropped something, jumped out of the car, reached under the bottom of the seat. He walked towards another body and shot her.
Mr Tapaivalu said Tane and Mr Tufui changed their clothes when they got home and he assumed they burned them. Paul Borich QC took issue with Mr Tapaivalu's version of events.
So you fell asleep?
I didn't say I fell asleep. I said I dozed off.
Okay. So you dozed off?
Yes.
In the middle of a drug deal?
Yes.
That went wrong?
Yes.
The court has heard Mr Tapaivalu was promoted from a runaround to a prospect after the shooting. The jury watched a covert video of a Comancheros meetup at Panmure Basin. Mr Tapaivalu said it was here he touched a set of rockers, vest badges, before shaking everyone's hand. Mr Borich accused him of lying about how much he knew to make himself look better.
You're not trying to play that down as a prospecting ceremony as opposed to a patching?
No.
You say you had no idea this was going to happen?
No.
Must have been a great surprise for you to turn up there and see all of those people?
Yes, it was.
Mr Borich's client, Mesui Tufui, has maintained his innocence. He was identified by Yolanda Tuuhiava as one of the men who shot her, but he told police it was a case of mistaken identity. He maintains he hung out with the other men on the night in question, but they dropped him home before the shooting. The trial before Justice Lang and a jury is expected to finish within a week. Atuiti ko te mātua, mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Annika Smith aho.
Food expiration dates are for the weak. That from Washington man Scott Nash, who spent a year consuming food that was well past its best by date, including dairy and meat that was over a month gone. Now, a warning, if you're munching on something tasty at the moment, you might want to put it down for the duration of this interview. Mr. Nash, who owns an organic grocery chain, wanted to see how accurate the labelling was, and he also simply cannot stand the thought of food going to waste.
Sometimes I'd open up some chicken or fish, and, my whole kitchen would not be smelling very good. I ate, for example, some tortillas, like the fresh tortillas, and they were a year past date, even after I had opened them. And then I ate some things that I think people would cringe at, like ground beef and deli meats. Some of those would be weeks, if not months, past date. Eggs, I would eat months past date. One time I opened up actually a few times, but one time I opened up some heavy cream, and it was already past date when I opened it up, and it was fine. And then it was still in my refrigerator come Thanksgiving, and this was about 2 or 3 months later, and it still smelled fine. So I whipped it up for whipping cream, and we used it on our Thanksgiving holiday pie. And it was fine. It didn't smell bad, and it tasted fine.
Hang on a minute. A Thanksgiving pie. So you had guests, I am assuming. Were they au fait with your? Well, it sounds like a bit of a science experiment. Did they know they were part of that experiment?
No, they didn't. But I'm telling you, I'm really an expert on knowing when food has turned bad, and it hardly ever turns bad by the expiration date. People are really surprised, and you have, items like, canned goods, things in jars and bottles. Those things never go bad. And then there's expiration dates on things that they don't expire. Like for one example was salt. Another example is baby wipes. And then there's like hand lotions. Like all these things have expiration dates, and they should have. They just don't go bad. Like, how does salt go bad, or a baby wipe for that matter? Many things I don't think should have a date, and those that should have a date, they're dated so short that it just causes a lot of waste, because the product lasts much longer than the expiration date will lead us to believe.
So what is going on here? Because that makes me think there's a commercial imperative here that food producers or producers would like you to throw things out, because that means that you need to go and buy replacement things. Do you think that's what's driving it?
Well, the cynical side of me says yes. That's called planned obsolescence. I think that they like it when we throw their products away, whether it's food or really any product that might break. Yeah, I think that could be part of it. And then I also think part of it is just ignorance. I think some manufacturers of food products also think that their product is like peaking at a certain date, and they want the product eaten before then so that it has 100% of the quality. But a lot of consumers think that means that it's when it gets to that date that it's a hazard. It's a food safety issue, which it isn't. It's just a quality issue is, I think, why a lot of manufacturers put a date on the products.
So this year-long experiment, how has it changed how you live now?
So I've always been dicey with eating products past date. Now I got a little more courageous. It all started with a yogurt that was 6 months past date, and it looked good, it smelled good, I tasted a little bit of it, it tasted fine, so I used it, and all was good. Even I didn't think that yogurt could go 6 months past date, but forever I've sort of, used the sniff test to see if something should be thrown away or not. But this past year, I documented everything, and since I knew I was documenting it, I even got more courageous and really pushed the envelope with things like ground beef and chicken and, like I said, milk. And I never got sick. The problem is that consumers think that they're going to die if they eat something at the stroke of midnight on the expiration date, and manufacturers slap a date on every product, even the ones that can't go bad, and then all the other products that just aren't even close to going bad. So there's just so much waste from this kind of chaotic, almost archaic food dating system.
My brain keeps going back to the ground beef, I'm sorry. So the ground beef that was out of date, you gave it a quick sniff and it seemed all right, but meat kind of goes slimy, doesn't it, Scott?
Sometimes they get a little off color. But what I would do is I would rinse it. Like sometimes if you get ground beef, for example, you open it up and it doesn't smell. I mean, it has an odor. It's not terrible, but it just has a little bit of an odor. And then what I would do is I'd rinse it, and then I'd smell it again. And if the odor was gone, then it was fine. If it still had an odor, if I was really hungry, I'd just cook it really well.
You're not selling this. You're not selling this very well. So I just want to say, a bit of a whiff. I want to know an example, Scott, line in the sand where you thought, nah, even for me, that piece of stinking, reeking, slimy meat is a no-go zone.
Yeah.
Where is one example would you experience that and thought, nah, not even I am going to put that in my mouth?
So usually chicken and fish, those are the two things, and then milk. When milk is sour, you can smell it. You don't even have to taste it. But chicken seems to get pretty gross, and so does fish, pretty quickly. And so I would maybe rinse some chicken off, and it would still have an odor. A couple of times I'd even cook it, and then I'd take a bite, and it wouldn't taste good. So I'd be like, no, I have to throw this away. So I'd try, but even I couldn't eat. And it comes down to the taste. Like, if it tastes bad, it is bad.
Okay, so all honesty, cards on the table, did you once get sick or feel off colour or anything as a result of this?
No, I'm telling you, I never got sick. The only time, at one time I had a bad oyster, but that had nothing to do with expiration dates. That was just something in the water. So I don't recall ever getting sick on eating anything expired. It's incredible waste, and it's not just a waste of their own money. It's a waste of food, and food is a valuable commodity in the whole world. And it's also an environmental waste because it takes a lot of energy and resources to produce food.
Scott, do your friends still come over for dinner?
Not really. I mean, when we have guests, the meat is fresh. It's top quality food.
And that's made me feel oh so peckish. Just before we go, in breaking news,